The Belt and Road is really as part of that need. The Asia Development Bank a couple years ago estimated between 2016 and 2030, just the Asia Pacific region. So this is not Africa, this is not Latin America or elsewhere or Eastern Europe. Just the Asia Pacific region is going to need an estimated $26 trillion of infrastructure investments to maintain, I believe, about a 3.5% growth rate for the economy overall. So China has pledged $1 trillion, and we can talk about what that trillion actually means, but it's still a drop in the bucket compared to what, according to ADB, is actually going to be needed over the next, at this point, 10 years. There are concerns about B&RI being part of a broader military project. So Djibouti now is home to China's first overseas military base. There's, of course, the bridges to nowhere. And that's been a big problem with respect to a lot of B&RI projects, is the fact that if you look at a lot of different, like Malaysia, for instance, other countries that have been recipients of B&RI, those projects have not, the economic viability or feasibility of those projects has been called into question. And once you have a leadership change, like you had in Malaysia, they were quickly scrutinized and canceled in many cases, because there was also an element of corruption in the recipient country as part of those projects. Questions about the secrecy of the deals, as I mentioned, about the branding aspects. And then really importantly, I want to really emphasize is that China's taken the tack that infrastructure is a key driver of economic development. But so I would argue actually, or I do argue, that institutions are actually more important than infrastructure. And so China has put a lot of emphasis on infrastructure and physical capital as a way to help other partner countries grow and move out of poverty. But ultimately, it's really about institutions that are the main drivers. The other case study I'd like to talk about briefly is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This one has pretty significant economic strategic importance. As I mentioned, it will provide port access or help to integrate infrastructure and trading routes and energy supply routes between Western China and the Gulf and Arabian Sea. It's estimated to cost about $62 billion over the span of a series of projects in this corridor. However, just like many other B&RI projects, it's come under scrutiny with a leadership change. So just like in Malaysia and just like in Sri Lanka and many other places, when the new Pakistan Prime Minister came into power, there was immediate scrutiny of these projects, and scrutiny because of the economic viability of these projects, and which really helped to sully, I think, some of the strong, very strong relationship between China and Pakistan historically because of that. They're still moving forward, and Pakistan is still in B&RI, but there's been a scaling back of many projects because of the questions about viability. There's also been a lot of pushback domestically. So in Baluchistan, which is one of the major areas where the project runs through, you can see in this area near the coast near Karachi, the part of Gwadar, there's been historically a lot of unrest and some unrest around access to gas reserves and economic equity and so forth, civil unrest. And so to the point where the Pakistani government has actually allocated I think about 10,000 troops to protect some of these Chinese investments. So there's definitely a lot of uncertainty and insecurity around these projects. I think, so China really goes out of its way to present B&RI as a multilateral, essentially a multilateral framework, but in the end, it's bilateral. I mean, all the deals are negotiated, it's China is the focal point, and all of the deals, all of the B&RI forms, they sign on all these countries through MOUs to be participants in the B&RI. But if B&RI was a multilateral framework or institution, then the decision-making about those investments would be happening in negotiation across many countries. And there would be some sort of decision-making body in the same way that the World Bank is a multilateral institution. And so all the investments in the World Bank, even though they're the funding it's almost the flip side. So the World Bank is multilateral And as part of that, the funding is highly diffuse, right? So it's highly distributed. Lots of countries contribute to the World Bank, and the World Bank then makes a collective decision. But then there's a focal point where the World Bank as an institution makes decisions about where money should go for investment projects. China is like the B&RI is like the inverse of that. So China is effectively the only benefactor of the B&RI. Even though there is the Asian Investment Bank, Infrastructure Investment Bank, but China is the primary majority stakeholder in that bank. But there is some participation by AIIB in that as well. But for the most part, China is the primary driver of the source of funds, the lending. And the multilateralism is really just multilateral, or it's multi. It's just that there are many recipient partner countries, but all of the deals are done in a bilateral fashion.